LA, welcome to the Livestream Lounge.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
So you are participating in the Startup Brewery Challenge later today.
We are.
We're very excited to have you up
Thank
there.
you.
Can you introduce our Livestream audience to Black Star Line Brewing and tell us what you're all about?
Absolutely.
And you
So
can
Black
hold the
Star
you can hold
Line
the mic
Brewing
closer
Company
too, so everyone
is
can hear
a
you.
grassroots, family-centered brewery, really launching a social movement centered in self-determination, social entrepreneurship, collective economics, and collective healing and liberation.
And you are actually very big on this topic of diversity.
Right.
It was funny. We actually had read a story, and you had been quoted in there with a lot of really interesting thoughts about the direction that diversity is heading in the beer industry. Can you maybe expound on that and talk to us about just your position on diversity in general?
Absolutely. So I think it's really important that we take note of who's in the room and who's not in the room. So last night when we were over at the CSO at AB InBev, there was one other black person, right? And he was pouring beer.
Yep.
And so I think it's really important for us at Black Star Line to create space for the us's. And a lot of times we have the challenges with securing funding, right?
Sure.
Due to the historical and demographic legacies and the ways that the system is set up to keep us from that.
Interesting.
So a lot of us are bootstrapping. We've been bootstrapping. We've used all sorts of resources, community resources, food stamps to get to brew.
Wow.
And so we're in this really precarious position where we want to grow and we want to officially launch, but we don't have the access to secured funding or any types of traditional funding, investors. So it's really taking a community effort to even get us here. We had to do fundraising to get us here.
Right.
So it's a completely different scale.
How much of that is a diversity issue, and how much of that is sort of either a brand positioning issue,
Right.
or some of the other struggles that every brand kind of encounters?
Yeah, I think that there's a difference here when we're talking about diversity versus the systematic and systemic situations, the institutional ways that exploitation happens, capitalism, and us being the folks who are the most vulnerable, the most marginalized.
Right.
Being on the other end of that, and it was done like this by design, right? So it doesn't matter if you're the greatest brand, if you have the best beer, the best product, there's a huge divide that it takes folks who are willing to understand that and be uncomfortable to realize, like, hey, this is all of our responsibility. There's a reason that this room that we're in right now is almost completely and exclusively white, right? So that's really the types of conversations that we're looking to engage and have so that we can create more opportunities.
Right, so you talk about looking to engage and have those conversations. How are you guys doing that? How do you engage customers on the topic of diversity?
Right.
And what have those conversations been like? You said they're uncomfortable, they're tough to have.
Right.
So maybe talk to our audience about just what that process has been like for you just in the short time that you've been up and running.
Absolutely. So Larry's Lounge is an experience that we cultivate for folks to be able to come to a safe space, whether you're LGBT, veteran, differently abled, to talk about issues of intersectionality. Often diversity is a word that folks use because it's more comfortable than talking about racism, sexism, patriarchy, supremacy, interlocking supremacy systems. So we address those issues head on. We look at the issues facing our communities, whether it's police brutality, whether it's blight, whether it's having food deserts, and really begin to put it in a way that's both palatable and rooted in our historical legacy. So Black Star Line Brewing Company, the name comes from the historical Black Star Line, which was used as a vehicle of liberation for folks here in the United States, for folks in Jamaica, for folks on the African continent to come together around this idea of collective liberation. So folks who even hear the name Black Star Line get it, right? Folks begin crying, folks are excited without even tasting the beer because they know that this is a grassroots movement. So for us, it's cultivating the space, holding the space, calling in our ancestors, and being really radically honest about the types of conversations that are not polite, that folks don't want to talk about and are really hard.
And where does beer fit into all that?
Yeah, so we are the original fermentators, right? Like we've been fermenting all sorts of stuff since the beginning. In the beginning, there was black folks brewing beer on Africa, right? So for us, beer is a gateway. It provides opportunities for folks. We're looking to be in wine and whiskey by year 3 and 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we have a really aggressive social mission that puts us back at the center of our consumption. We know that there's 34% of all black dollars spent on alcohol are spent on beer.
Wow.
We look at the collective buying power of blacks and Latinos being $3.4 trillion in 2017 alone. However, we're not buying from us. After Black Wall Street was destroyed, the money in our communities stopped distributing in our communities. Before that, money in our communities used to circulate 7 times. Now we're lucky if it circulates once.
Wow.
So for us, this really is about collective economics and pathways to liberation.
So in what ways are you going to go back, get to rebuilding that through the brewery and the distillery and the winery, I guess?
So we're building the first ever Black Brewers Guild, which is exciting that we can come together and have this opportunity. This fall, we're hosting the first ever Black Brewers Gathering, looking at connecting with direct trade, putting folks back to work and supporting others in entrepreneurship, growing hops, looking at bottle workers, folks who are making taps, folks who are alchemists, and really developing this network so that we can embody these collective economics and put folks back to work, building this black supply chain.
Interesting. So you guys have already gone out and identified the individuals, at least within the beer space, that are, as you said, the Black Brewers Association, that are across multiple tiers or multiple pieces of the industry, making products that you use, growing hops, everything. And how many people have you encountered that are actually doing that? I mean, it seems like it's got to be a pretty small group.
It's very small, but the passion and the interest is there. So we've met a lot of folks who've wanted to start breweries, but similar to us, don't have the ability due to financing. And what we have been doing is collaborating with nonprofits like Green Opportunities in Asheville, who have these culinary arts programs to do pairings through their art program to look at wine. So really thinking in the ways that our people do about how are we doing this intersectionally with the justice lens that focuses on healing.
And the Asheville scene in general, I mean, I got to imagine that Black Star Line is, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but like an unfamiliar brand to a lot of folks there. Right. And you're certainly a bit of an outlier in a way. What's the response been to the brand itself and your message and everything that you're trying to promote?
We've had a lot of great allies like Kendra Penland and the ABA, Sanctuary Brewing Company, Asheville Community is Brewing. And there's a lot of folks who are really threatened because we're talking about things like the police assassinating folks and Jerry Williams being assassinated last year. And folks wonder how that's related to brewing. Brewing for us is a resiliency drink, right? It's how we all come together. It's what we use to play cards. It creates and forms community. So I think overall, it's been a really great, warm welcome, and there are definitely some challenges that I don't know are specific to Asheville versus being in an industry full of beards.
Right, yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Yes,
I'm working on this one
here. I'm working on mine too.
Well, I did want to address one final topic. I know we're running out of time here, but the Brewers Association recently formed its own diversity committee, and that was a big sort of talking point at the Craft Brewers Conference. As someone who is intimately familiar with this topic, I guess one, is this something that you plan on contributing to? Mm-hmm. And two, what do you think the focus should be and what would you like to see out of this committee?
Yeah, so I'm excited to know that the Brewers Association has created this, and I think for Black folks, it's also important for us to have our own space, because there's something that happens when other folks come together in a space that's not uniquely ours, and it's a both and, right? We're code switching, we're straddling the line. I would love to see us create space for more people to get involved in the industry, to connect with folks who are willing to take a risk on some young folks outside of Asheville that are trying to get in. To have some mentoring and things of that nature, and to really look at ways that we're supporting holistically folks that are in brewing families, brewing communities, addressing issues of blight, and having a sense of social responsibility to reinvest versus taking resources out of communities.
So is this something that you plan on working with the Brewers Association on? Have you already approached them on this? Or?
We would love to, but for us being such a small startup, it costs a lot of money. So money and capital, especially for people of color, are really prohibitive for us to get even inside the rooms.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you've definitely talked about the access to capital issue, and hopefully that's something that you guys can solve and figure out, because I think the message that you guys are bringing to the space and what you guys are doing is super important. and I'm excited to kind of watch it all unfold and stay in touch with you guys and follow you guys. So
thanks for having us.
yeah, good luck. And
thank you. I'm going to give you one of these.
Yes, good luck in the Startup Brewery Challenge as well.
Awesome.
LA McCrae, everyone. Black Star Line Brewing from the Asheville area.